it out. But with remote tools these days, you can make that same space a virtual space. It's also globaling. So Sunday, I was in a mob with several folks that are on our Zoom today. And we had participants from Africa, several countries in Europe, and several states in the USA. I was actually in Maryland, not Washington, D.C., but most people outside of the US have no idea where Rockville, Maryland is, or even outside of our local area know where Rockville, Maryland is. D.C. suburb, for those of you who didn't know and care. So there are a couple roles, as there tend to be in Agile practices, and mob programming has them. So think of it as ideas and hands, as sort of on a general level. For an idea to get into code, it has to go through someone else's hands. Now, this is different from, say, most any other practice where it can directly go from the mind to the hands of the same person. In mob programming, it doesn't. This is Llewellyn Falco's idea, who, by the way, is an excellent technical coach. He's got lots of good stuff. Two main roles, if those of you familiar with extreme programming will recognize these terms, they're a little bit different. That's the driver and the navigator. There are a variety of other roles. We'll go into some of the general ones, but not into all of the details in this talk. We don't have the time. Main roles are, as I say, driver and navigator. So think about somebody in a road rally, and you have a driver who has his hands or her hands on the steering wheel, and you have the navigator who's figuring out where you should go. The driver is an intelligent input device. She has her hands on the keyboard and types and does nothing without the direction from the navigator. May ask questions, but doesn't actually go off on their own programming and typing without instruction. The navigator, on the other hand, explains the idea that we want to translate into code. This is not something most developers are very good at. Communicating ideas. Learning to do this is an extremely useful skill. It takes a while. So the navigator explains the idea that's to be translated, and the ideas flow from the navigator to the driver. Now, as you'll see today, that the level of explanation is going to depend on the experience actually of both of them. Specifically on the driver side, if the driver is really experienced in the programming language and the tools and that sort of thing, then the explanation should be very, very high level and conceptual. The higher level, the better that you can get away with. In contrast, someone new to the programming language or the tools or the domain needs a lot more detailed instruction. And we'll see some examples of both of those. And there's nothing wrong with being in either spot, particularly with mob programming, is you'll get a whole lot better quickly. I have seen people in the driver's role with good navigators who didn't know how to code at all, and by the fourth rotation could do several useful things without being told to do them explicitly how. Now, the rest of the mob is not sitting on their duffs, staring at their phones, or otherwise, chatting with one another. What they are doing is they may be asking clarifying questions, sharing their areas of expertise. They may be making suggestions. When they make suggestions is going to depend on the style of mob programming that you're using. If you've got a strong navigator, which is what we'll start with in today's session, then the navigator should be asking the mob for suggestions as opposed to everybody just shouting them out And when that happens, your navigator will need to sort of control the situation. Actually, that's a good role for the facilitator, because when we start out, people are not particularly good at following the rules of mobbing because they're new to them. So the then whoever's in that navigator position, regardless of what else is going on, is making a decision as to what should happen, okay? They make all of the decisions. They may get suggestions, but they go. Now, the facilitator guides the mobbing practices. Think about your roles that you've had as an Agile coach. You can add this type of skill to your collection of tools that you've been using already. Sort of like an extreme programming coach or a general Agile coach. Normally, that facilitator does not rotate with the mob. There are cases where he or she may. Now, who are the team members in the mob? Now, that's going to depend some. But it is going to be the people that are every day with the mob are definitely in the mob, and they're rotating through the driver and navigator roles. When they are not driver or navigator, they are, taking those other roles, and they join the other mobbers. Now, there may be people who are not permanently part of your team, but that are, that is that they're not there every day, all day. And that might improve your product owner or your business analyst. Now, your business analysts and your product owners may be living with the team all the time, in which case, hooray. But often that's not the case. Security, DBA, various other technical specialists and managers. They may be present only part of the day, or they may rotate in and out with the team if they need a particular specialty, say DevOps for a couple of weeks to get something in place. They may be part of the team full time during that time, but not otherwise. Interesting thing is when you have some of these people who aren't regularly parts of the team, like managers, it may be the first time that the manager has ever really experienced or understood what the development team goes through. And likewise, it may be the first time that your technical folks appreciate what the managers do. And we'll have some folks that can tell you about their particular experience in this role. Now, mobbing. We rotate people in and out of these positions. So for each driver and navigator, they're going to be doing, in our case, because we're going to be focusing on code, we're going to be practicing test-driven development. You'll see what that is in practice, and later I'll give you a more theoretical explanation of how that works if you're unfamiliar with it. They're good. They check in the code whenever it passes and refactor as needed. We'll be doing this a little bit differently because of the challenges with some of the tools we're using and passing the keyboard, and I'll explain what's happening there. And then you switch on the timer. This is how it normally works. And after each round, we're going to have a micro retrospective. So let's say that we have a series of potential driver navigators, and Mary starts out with her hands on the keyboard as driver. In this case, Raj would be navigating, and he directs Mary what to type. At a high level if he can, and at a low level if he can't. And then he asks the other team members for suggestions as appropriate. Now, after the timer goes off, Mary is going to switch out into the general mob, and then Raj would be the navigator, and Selena would be, Raj would be the driver, excuse me, is what I meant to say, and Selena would be the navigator, and so on around it goes. Our micro retrospective is a little bit different it's quite different in some ways from other retrospectives. One, it's very, very short, and two, it only focuses on two things. How did that session feel? You know, how are you feeling about this? And what's the best thing that happened that round? Something we want to do more of. Woody Zuhl calls this turning up the good. Now, what you notice that we're not doing is we're not asking what people really didn't like, or what do they want to do less of, or how they think something should change. The point of this is to base it on experience of what was working and ratchet that up. And the more you do that and experiment with other things as you go on, the more good things you'll find. And the experience has been that in itself just naturally gets better and better and better. Okay, so that is the basic format. Now I'm going to ask people to go. I'm going to ask the mobbers themselves. Oops. Go away, don't need that. To go to Cyber Dojo. Not spelled that way.
Hey, Camille, I thought we were going to just use the one laptop and exchange remote control.
Actually, what we're going to do, because of the problems that we have, some people are on Macs and some people are on PCs, was to use Cyber Dojo for checking in between switches.
Yeah, there was significant lag when we tried.
Yeah, it deals with the lag. So this is not a problem that you would necessarily have in another environment. This is going to be something that is specific to the problems that we're going to experience here. Now I'm going to add to the chat for a second who we're going to, whoops, where did that go? Sorry there, guys.
Live demo is the scariest thing.
Yeah, live demos. Always fun. Okay? This is where we're going to go. Now, in the chat, when I find where the chat is, chat, zoom, zoom, zoom.
On your sharing tab.
In my sharing tab. Yes, why don't I stop sharing for a second? Will you know what the Cyber Dojo is? Stop sharing. Bring up Zoom, very good. Now in the chat, we're going to start out with Andrew, Dana, Insua, and Yusuf. Brian, we're going to switch you in on the second one and second time through.
So Dana has requested that I be Dana, because Dana is in the middle of flowing some work code. She's actually coding right now.
Okay, well then we'll change that.
So I'm Dana.
All righty, hang on. Okay, so I'm going to put what we have here into the chat. All right, so go to cyberdojo.org. Andrew.
Yes.
And share your screen.
1 second.
That's okay.
Okay.
Is that a different Brian, or am I Brian D?
No, the Brian is you. There's
Brian,
only one Brian that I'm aware of in here. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, never mind. I figured
First
it was
order. Your name's Dana.
Cyberdojo.com is for sale.
Yeah.
Really? Okay.
Hey, there we go.
All right. So
Okay. So what I want you to do, and you've done this at least once before, but not everybody else has. This is a really cool tool, by the way, for learning about a variety of things, and how to practice test-driven development, how to work as a mob. Great stuff. Okay, so click on I'm on my own. This is counterintuitive because yes, we're working as a group. Now create a new exercise. Not the custom exercise, new exercise.
Yeah.
Okay?
Create a new exercise, right?
New exercise, right. Got to create a new exercise. Okay, now choose FizzBuzz. The straight FizzBuzz, okay? Click next. All right, now select Java and JUnit. We're doing that. It was sort of the environment of nobody is perfect at at all of these or any of these languages. So it's a mixture. By the way, group your audience. You're going to see some folks being really good at this because they're familiar with Java and other folks being less so. But that would be true of any single language we chose in this particular group. So click OK.
Hey,
All right.
Camille, could we make the font a little larger, perhaps?
That's one of the things I was going to ask for.
And so I had a question. If am I driving?
Yes, you're the driver. Now, if, oh, right, I got Andrew in there. Yeah, you're supposed to be the driver. Well, Andrew,
So if Andrew shares his link to the chat, I can pick it up from here.
Yes.
that should be in the chat.
No, the
Oh,
link.
his link in the chat. Yes, good point. But Andrew, you'll, right. Yes, this should be fine if you can pick it up.
Here, I'm trying to go access the chat as Alt H.
Yeah, I made a mistake because your name was at the top of the list, but actually the driver is the one who should be going in here.
All right, I'm trying to access the chat here. Let me do this to access the chat.
Yeah.
All right.
When you're presenting, there's a bar up top, and you have to click the drop down at the far right. I can't think of what
Right.
you need.
Yeah, no,
And for the moment, if you are not in the mob itself, if you would turn off your video, that will help with some bandwidth issues.
And I have host is disabled attendee screen sharing as an error.
We can turn it, we will turn it back on later.
I can't share my screen.
You can't share your screen.
No.
Okay.
Stop sharing?
You're now a co-host, Brian.
Thank you very much.
Oh, okay. Maybe we need to have all of the mobbers be co-hosts.
I believe I made everybody a co-host. I may have missed. Make co-host. And James, where's James? James, can you share your screen? All right, I think I got everybody.
Okay, so whose screen are we looking at? Are we looking at Andrew's or Brian's?
Brian.
Screen now.
Brian's. Okay, so we're in the right order. Now, what I'd like you to do is from the chat copy. Oh, okay. Well, let's look at the README first. Let's look at what the problem is.
Write a program that prints the numbers from 1 to 100, but for multiples of 3, print fizz instead of the number, and for the multiples of 5, print buzz. For numbers which are multiples of both 3 and 5, print fizz buzz. I hope my narration was good.
Sounds good. So everyone understands what this basic problem is?
Yep.
Do they? I think so.
I don't need to understand because I'm driving.
You're driving. That's right. You don't have to understand because Andrew will explain it to you.
Exactly. I'm a navigator.
You are a navigator. And you were running the test before we looked at what the code was. Let's go look at what the code is first.
That is my habit. I'm sorry. That's what
I mean, yes, the driver does have permission. Let's look at the test.
Test-driven
Okay.
development.
So we're going to follow test-driven development. But before we even do that, and you see the red ball. For those of you who've never used Cyber Dojo, this means a test failed. And for what we have here, and this is dealing with a Douglas Adams example from Life, the Universe, and Everything, where the expected answer is 42, and that's not what we got. But before we go there, well, yeah, you can show them the code for a second, and then but do not change anything yet.
No, I'm the driver.
Okay. Go back to hiker test, and let's get one more thing on lines 4. By the way, for those of you who are doing mob programming, whatever environment you're working on, you want to turn line numbers on, because it is really helpful when dealing with code with other people working together, that they understand who is, you know, what the line of code is, what we're talking about, because there may be more than one line of code that, and particularly as code gets long, that describes it. Now, let's see. Yes. Go. So what we're doing here for the audience is that we're listing all the names of the people that are in the mob and their roles. Now, in a second, I'm going to find a timer and start timing this, because what we're going to want to do is rotate people regularly. Okay, what we're going to use a 3 to 5 minute timer. That is, it's going to go off at 3, and if it looks like it needs to be extended a little bit just to get it a little tiny bit more done, then we'll give it up to another 2 minutes. Everybody understand that?
Sorry, how many minutes was the timer again?
It's 3.
3.
3
about-
minutes with a possible 2-minute extension.
Okay.
Okay? All right. You can save that and run the test again, and then explain, Navigator, what's going on and what you want to do about it.
Let's see. So we expected 42, but it looks like the output was 54. So let's go into hiker.java and let's see what's going on. So we're returning 6 times 9. So what we can do is we can return it 42, and then that test should pass. Ooh, actually worked. All right. So now, if we go to hikertest.java, should we add a new test or change up the test a little? Let's thank you, Brian. So we're gonna add a new test.
Oh,
And what should I name this test?
what are we testing for?
I'm thinking.
What's the simplest test?
Stiffness test.
What's
Nah.
the simplest thing?
The mob can chime in.
Mom?
Simplest thing that
What's
could
the
possibly
Bill
work.
Bender?
Sorry.
Let's, we
Sure,
can look at the
Lori.
requirements, right? So what are we supposed to
Requirement?
be testing for? Yeah.
Well, it looks like we can. If it looks like we're in hiker.java. So let's go to the hiker.java class. Trying to think what else we can, because we can create a new method. Maybe
Well, we want the test first, right? So what's the first thing we should test for according to the requirements?
according to the requirements, it looks like we're trying to write a program that prints multiples from 1 to 100. So it looks like it looks like we are looking for it looks like a for loop that goes from 1 through 100.
What's the simple test?
Trying to think how I can break it down more.
You can think about only one thing.
We can test just number 1. We can just test only one number, or we could just test fizz. We can test for the presence of fizz.
Let's see. The timer has gone off, and if you would save this by running the test and pass it.
So this test is going to pass, by the way, because we're in the middle of creating a new test.
No, it failed because
Why did? Oh, because I made a typo. That's awesome. Sweet.
Okay, so driver and navigator get back into switch and change who is doing what.
All right. So I'll just update it real quick. So
Yes, please do.
So Andrew is now the. How are we rotating?
That James would be the driver and you would be the navigator.
All right. I'm gonna stop sharing, James. If you pick up that link, then you'll get where I left off.
Yep, I just need to share my screen.
Yep.
Okay, let me know if everybody can see okay or if I need to pump it up a little bit.
You're good.
Good.
Okay, so we had hiker test. Okay, so Brian,
So I meant to type more stuff there. So let's just change the name of that test to it should produce fizz for multiples of 3. Well, let's just start for 3.
Okay.
okay,
We'll make it better, right? All right, and I am not a Java programmer, so
what do you want to do?
so well, let's see. We'll make string expected to be fizz.
I'm not a Java programmer. Okay, so string expected fizz.
Get fizz. So so the string fizz. All right, and then hiker answer 3. Right. Let's see. Now, so I think actual should also be a string.
Oh, yep. Okay,
And run that test. I should blow up all over the place.
that's what I'm thinking. Failed to save traffic light. Are you mobbing in a practice session? If so, please refresh your browser to sync. Okay.
Do what?
I
That's actually,
I've never seen that error before.
Oh,
if it's new.
okay. Have you not refreshed your screen when you started?
I did. Yeah. Well, I'm going to refresh again. Hopefully this doesn't blow up our work.
Shouldn't be too bad. We haven't gone too far, so it's fine.
Oh, yep. We got to start over. Okay.
The other important thing
Do
there,
what we did before.
the other important thing, Camille, is just that everybody knows that only the current driver should be hitting the test button.
Yeah.
Yes.
The fact that you got that dialogue almost certainly means that someone hit the test button that wasn't the current driver.
Ah,
I've
So
never
please-
seen that before.
maybe
myself.
I logged in too early is the thing. Okay, is that right, Brian? That's what we had?
I like it. And you know what? Also, one other thing before we go, delete the first test because I don't care about that.
Okay.
There's just no point. It's nothing, has nothing to do with what we're trying to do. It's just going to make me unhappy.
All right. String actually method is going to be applied to the given type.
All right, so let's go to Hiker Java, and we can do all this renaming later, but let's just make sure we get something that's working. So make that a public static string. And return fizz.
Okay. The first timer went off, but we'll give you another 2 minutes.
Yeah, we'll just
Get something.
About your signature of the method.
I'm sorry, what's that? Go ahead, Brian.
well, it needs to be in quotes, number one.
Oh, because it's a string. Duh.
Yeah.
Right.
And then take in an int, because Bob pointed out we didn't actually take in the parameters. So taking it, no, it's int. It's taking in an int of number. Int num.
You have to declare the type.
Where at? Right here?
You got it.
So int num. not
Where
int.
you get the 3.
All right. So I can keep it a string
Name.
and then int num3.
Just
No,
num.
that.
Just
No,
num.
no 3. Deletes a 3.
Oh, just int num. Okay.
Yeah. And return fizz. Run the test.
Oh, it passed.
All right.
Okay. Let's switch. So you've saved it by running the test. Let's switch drivers.
All right.
And the new driver, let's go look at our test file, see who the new driver is. Okay, that should be Insa.
Yes.
Right, you're the new driver. And James is the new navigator. And have we saved that?
You run the test again to save it.
Yes, save it by running the test. And
And then the
now
new test
Insa,
will
if
take-
you would click on that link and hit refresh to make sure that we get the right one.
Okay.
And once we've made that switch, I'll start the timer again.
and share screen.
Yes, and share your screen.
Okay. Where did it go?
The link should be in chat if you can't find it.
Your Chrome tab down there is probably where
Through
it's
the
at.
other screen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now hit the refresh before you go do that, just to make sure that you're on the right version, which it looks like you are.
All right. So let's go to hiker test.
Okay.
So right now we've got a test that just simply tests for 3. I would assert we need to test the boundaries as well. So we should test for the number 1, right? So if we can just create a new test.
Okay.
And call it, it should give 1 for 1, right? Return 1 for 1.
Okay.
Or it should return 1. How about that? It should return 1. That's simple.
One. Okay.
Yep. So then we want int expected.
Really?
Yeah. Right?
Well, go look at the requirement again.
It is a strongly typed language.
Yeah. We want an int expected because 1 is supposed to give 1, right?
That's one interpretation.
And that's my interpretation anyway. If it's if you give it 1, it should return 1, right? We go back to hiker test.
Okay.
Right. So int expected 1, no quotes. Int actual, sorry. Hiker dot answer. Oh, now I see what the problem is. Okay. Yeah, it's okay. So okay, but that'll break our other test. I see what Camille's doing. All right. So we actually have to move that back to we have to move
String?
that back to string. Yeah,
No.
string for both.
This is a limitation on Java.
Yep.
You could do what you're trying to do in a different language.
Yep. Okay, so go back to then change the string expected to just 1, but as a string, right? The number 1, but in the quotes.
Okay, like that.
Yep. And then Yep. Hiker answer we changed to 1.
In quotes or just 1?
Yep. No, in quotes. Nope. I'm sorry. I apologize. No, go ahead. Just 1. Yep. Okay. Now let's run the test. I think it's going to fail.
Mm.
Yep. Okay. So now we got to go into hiker.java and add some logic, right?
Okay.
We need an if statement, right?
Mm,
So on hit return at the beginning of line 5.
You want if before return?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right, so if answer.
It should be num, right?
Yeah. If num, I'm sorry, if num, yeah, is
But
equal
that was
to.
a legitimate question to ask. And she's just asking a question.
Yep. If num is equal to 3, we want to return fizz, right? Else, return. I'm not sure how to say this. We want to return the value of num, right?
What's the simplest thing that could possibly work?
Well, 1. Yeah.
There you go.
In quotes, 1. Yep. All right. Now let's try and run that.
Yeah.
And it passes. Okay.
Okay, let's switch. We've gone over our 3 minutes and are into our 5, and go on to the next one because you've saved it, right?
Yep.
By
So
running the
this-
test, you saved it.
Yeah, running the test, that saves it.
If you were working with an IDE, then you'd need to explicitly push that probably to a somewhere.
Okay, I did send link. Who's the next? Oh, I'm the next.
You're navigating.
Okay.
And now you're navigating. Who's the next driver?
One second, me.
Okay. Yusuf,
Camille,
you're
if I
up.
can offer a suggestion.
Sure, Bob.
Make the exiting driver's last task to update the navigator and driver designation and show it.
Oh,
So
Yeah,
everyone
that's
knows
probably an excellent idea, Bob.
Everybody can see fine?
Okay, have we now switched?
Yes.
Starting the
Yeah.
timer.
okay.
What do we want to do now?
Okay.
Okay, so Yusuf, go into hiketest.java and create a new test. Let's try doing buzz test. Just copy first test.
What's the simplest thing? Is there anything that could be simpler that you might do logically?
So we have tested,
Tested 1.
yeah, and we have tested fizz, as in if it is 3, then it should give us
This
fizz.
is actually more complicated than 1, but moving on, what would be the next most complicated thing besides 1?
To test 2.
There we go.
Two. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so change this 1 in a string to 2. Yeah, and change this string expected to 2. And in hiker answer, yeah, change this to 2.
Okay.
Now in hiker Java, if you go into hiker Java, you can test, yeah, it will break.
Yep. Okay.
So if number is equal to 3.
So what if we just return num as just 2 string and the else?
Okay, so navigator, are you asking for advice from the mob or are you just making suggestions?
I'm just gonna
Advice, always advice.
Okay, so you're asking for advice. All right, give advice, Mob.
well, so the idea I have is that we know from the requirements that 3 and that 3 and 5 will eventually be what we're trying to go after. So if we're going after 2 and we want 1 and 2 to work, it seems like the simplest thing is just to return num.toString on the else.
Yeah, I see. So
That way 1 and 2 would pass.
All right, navigate me.
So Joseph, in else part in return, instead of returning this string, remove this whole no, I mean just string 1.
Which one do you want me to, this thing?
No. In else.
Quote 1 is what she's talking about.
In else, yeah.
On line 8.
Yeah, you've got less than 2 minutes, by the way.
1. What do you want me to do?
Remove quotes as well. And now return num.
Turn num.
.toString.
ToString like this?
I mean, as in TOSTRING.
Yeah, and it's capital S on the string, and it's a function. So it'd be num.to capital S string, and then parentheses.
Like this, I send you in chat. Look into chat.
Oh, I can't, but I think it's time to move on anyways, right?
Okay, so capital S, after 2, capital S.
S.
P.
E.
P.
T.
String.
Spring.
I.
Okay. There you go.
And parentheses.
Parentheses.
There you go.
Perfect.
Okay.
And now test it.
Okay.
Okay.
But its
Okay.
timer is up.
Timer is almost up. Why don't we switch? Because it's going to take more than the 32 seconds to solve.
Okay, let me just go ahead and update the name.
Yes.
Sure, that would work. Of course, I'm not a Java
And,
early.
all right, Andrew's driving now. 1 second. Test. All right.
All right,
Let me give you the link.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Thank you. All right. So now I'm going to open this up. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So now I'm the driver. You guys see my screen well?
Yep.
All right, perfect.
All right, go to
So let me.
go to hiker.java.
Okay.
Asking the mob for advice.
Oh, because it's not an integer. Oh, never mind.
Well, here's something, by the way, one of the things that mobbers can do is you could ask somebody to go on the web and look at what the actual syntax is.
Okay.
Well, I know what my mistake was when I suggested that is that it's an int, so it's not an integer, so it's not going to have a toString method. If we converted that to an integer instead of an int, it would have a toString method.
Okay.
No, it's weird. So I forget and how to. I know exactly what you mean. I just don't remember the syntax.
Integer got toString, paren, and the thing to be converted, which in this case is num.
Thank you.
So what I was going to say was if we change the input parameter to the function to an integer, it would have a toString method, but right now it does not.
Yeah, and it's not int, it's integer, the class, not the primitive.
It's a capital I, like that? Okay.
That's syntactically correct and will work.
All right. Should I try and test this?
Yep.
All right. Oh, by the way, when we ask the mob for help, it reminds me of like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Like,
Thanks, Bob.
like
Phone
Yeah.
friend.
yeah.
Cool.
Yes, call a
Success.
friend. And in this case, the friend was able to just call it out. But if you hadn't, then someone could have just gone on their browser, Googled it, and shown you what the code suggestion was. So it's for quick researches, the mob can do it in real time.
There's about 3 other ways too.
Yeah, but that's one way.
Yeah. What's the next thing to test? Go back to the hiker.test. Hiker test Java.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Is there
Here.
anything we need to refactor now that everything's in the green? Nobody's done any refactoring yet.
So, you know, we're doing casting on, and Bob, I'd like your opinion on this as well. So, I'm sure you'll give it. So we're doing casting right now to cast the int to an integer. Would it not be cleaner just to have the parameter come in as an integer instead of casting?
How about something at a higher level? Something even bigger than that?
Well, we could start with appropriately naming things.
Yep, I
Oh,
want to
you're
say
good.
that.
What a great idea.
That's silly talk.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So does this have
Oh,
anything
like
to
you're
do
forever.
yeah, I
with
got-
hitchhikers? Very good.
I have a good name. I'll name it Stupid.
Stupid, yeah.
I like that a lot.
That's an appropriate name, right?
What would be a better name?
I'll give I know the answer, but I'll wait for my navigator to tell me.
Navigator, what would be a better name?
Fizz Buzz.
Very good.
Fizz plus test. Yeah, that's nice.
And then because it's Java,
You'll have to rename it using the ... There you go.
Thank you.
Yes, you don't want to delete it.
Yeah,
Well,
I have our whole work go.
Oh.
Where else do you need to change it?
And I guess you need to change that one too. Yeah.
Maybe
Fizz
test,
Buzz.
perhaps?
You know, it's terrifying how much change people do in real life without using version control.
It gives me the chill.
But we had version control here because we checked everything in.
No, I know. I was just pointing out that in real life, people make giant change without version control, and it's just terrifying.
I completely agree with you, Brian. I've seen that too, and it really does scare me.
In the category of renaming, how consistent are the names of your test?
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time, Bob?
How consistent are the names of your 3 tests?
It should produce Fizz for 3. It should return 1. It should return 2. I mean, I guess they can be named better, like instead of saying it.
The first one could say it should return Fizz for 3, since the other ones say it should return.
Produce. Oh.
Oh, you mean patron?
That's true.
I think the timer was up, right?
Okay. Run the test.
Yep. It's running.
Okay, and it's green. Now, I'd like everybody to stop because we have now gone through once. And I'd like you to do a micro retrospective.
I think 3 minutes is too short.
Well, yes, but you actually got closer to 5 on most things. Okay, so first of all, how do you feel? How does everybody feel?
I feel pretty I learn especially really when I'm the navigator or the driver, I can just feel the information being absorbed in my mind. Even when we did the dry run a few days ago, it just I could feel the information just being absorbed in my mind.
Okay.
I love
Andrew?
that.
So, Brian, Yusuf?
I feel I have forced to pay attention
Okay.
because I'm participating in the mob.
Yeah, and I was more focused on test and not on naming. So when you said that, okay, there are some minor things we have to focus on. So I was like, yeah, there are names too. So it was helpful.
So how did it feel?
I enjoyed.
Emotionally, how did everybody feel emotionally about this?
So for me, it felt great, but I share, I think, with some of the audience for katas, right? Not for the practice of mob programming,
Yeah,
but for katas,
special case.
the super micro, because you can see the result, right? I've done this like 6 times, right? So
Uh-huh.
I know where we're going, and I'm like, okay, but let's just get there, right? You know, so sometimes there's a little bit of a patience that has to be brought to bear when you're doing it as a kata, right? Because you can see where you're headed, and like somebody just pasted some, you know, reference code in the chat, and
Jose.
yeah, but the point is not to get it right, it's to learn and practice the craft, right? So that's wonderful, and it feels really good, but there is that part of my brain that just wants it to be done, right? So
And that's true. And I'll say that for a demonstration, though, that working through the kata and not cheating and posting the answer is important. And I can't wait for the Q&A because I've got some direct feedback about how we've used it internally to really help.
One thing I'd like to mention is when you're like the first one up to bat, for some reason my mind froze. I'm like, okay, what should I do next? And when somebody told me go look in the requirements, I'm like, oh yeah, that would be a good idea.
So how did that feel?
You know, at first, I was like a deer in headlights for a few moments because when I'm in the zone, just because I felt like I was in presentation mode, but I didn't know like what to present. Whereas when I'm a developer, I'm in like developer mode where I just want like silence and I just want to like just code. So I was kind of like in this in-between stage where I was programming and presenting, which is not something I'm used to. And a friend of mine told me I should launch a YouTube channel because that's how he got over that that emotion.
Okay. So has everyone had a chance to talk a little bit about how they feel? Okay. What would you like to do more of?
It would be, I've seen it where
What was really good about this? What do you want to do more of?
allowing other people in the mob to help.
Okay.
Yeah, advices or what can be better.
Okay.
Sometimes like socially when I'm presenting and like I mean I presented before, but coding and presenting, so sometimes I just don't have the full vision in my mind. Sometimes when someone just tells me, you know, just look at the requirements or just do something, I would just prefer to just say that and then I'll do it.
yeah, for me, just this, more of this. I'd like this in my life every day. That's it.
More. Okay, just more.
Yeah, more.
Any other comments that haven't been covered?
So in this case, I guess, because I guess a lot of us don't know Java and I barely know coding. So
Okay.
I think it would be beneficial to let in the mob the other people navigate as well. It's just the actual navigator gets the last word, but everyone else can still say stuff in an orderly manner.
Next time through, it sounds like the consensus is that we should move away from the strong navigator role and let other people make suggestions more freely.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm going.
So save that. That's what we want to do for the moment. We'll get to probably a little bit more, but I'm going to go back and present a few more. Whoops, that's the timer. Get the slides, a couple more things.
Camille, can we do a quick question and answer from the group?
I want to show one or two things and then get the question and answer.
Cool.
Okay. So there are only a couple of things. Wherever I find a Zoom.
Zoom.
That's not it. Oh, okay. Let's try this. Here we go. Share screen. Desktop. Find the presentation. And excuse me. Current slide. Okay. So for those of you who have not seen this before, this is test-driven development, at least the practice that we were using today. Let's write a little bit of a test with low-level functionality for which we have no code. And then we run the test, watch it fail, Because there's no code, then we write just enough code to make it pass. And that is what we call the green. Check in the code and tests. Clean up if it gets messy over time, you saw us do at least a little bit of refactoring. Run that test again to make sure that it works, and then check in the code and tests. So this isn't the only thing that you can use mobbing for. You can use it for lots of things. Story mapping, empathy mapping, impact mapping, UI design. As Agile coaches, you have been doing this in other ways for a while. You might try the driver navigator role on this, and you can of course still use other forms of collaboration. But think about all the ways that you can even further collaborate than you're doing now. And as we'll be showing in a little bit more demo as we go a little bit further on, that it gets a little easier when your mob it works well together when more people can navigate simultaneously, but the official navigator always makes the decision. Anyway, so there are a whole bunch of things you can use, and this is just a few suggestions. There are some common questions people come up with. What about various other classic type of roles you may already have on your teams? Testers, business analysts, product masters. Well, testers are part of the technical team, and you should never have been doing anything without them. They should not be a separate team. So they rotate with the mob like everybody else. Including manual testers who've never done any type of automated testing before. They will learn as part of the process, and they have a really good insight into things that the developers don't. They're like Secret Service agents. They're always looking for the bad guys, whereas the devs tend to think of Happy Path and be looking at the president who's giving a talk. Business analysts obviously bring in a lot of domain experience, and particularly how the domain ties with the technical world. Product owner, pretty darn critical to your team to get as much as you can insights into what you're developing from a domain point of view. And also from last month's talk, you may remember that one of our problems we're having in the Agile space currently is that our backlogs are way, way too big. And counter to that, if we've got our product owners involved with the teams all the time, at least showing up daily, then they can really help guide that. You need a few stories, but there's going to always be some clarifications. And you've been using, one hopes, the Three Amigos approach on your stories. Well, together, this is just putting that again, it's turning it up to 11. Scrum Masters, you can have lots of roles on that, including you can learn some of the facilitation techniques with this. It's similar to other facilitation techniques you've learned before. If you're not a developer, you might sort of pair with one of the techies on the team for some suggestions, but you'll see things that the techies won't. Managers, they're wonderful to have. Maybe the first time a manager, as I think I may have mentioned before, has really understood what was going on. And it may be the first time devs has really understood what happens in their life. So what about it? Do we mob all day? Well, that depends on the team. I like to mob as much as I can, but not every team kind of works that way. Many do continuously and successfully, and they are really hyper productive. But some teams only mob for a few hours a day. Any amount of mobbing is a great asset. I have seen teams that only really mob on really hard problems. I think we're trying to learn new things. I think they're missing a little bit, but they're still gaining some benefit. So give it a try. You may find that it's a little bit hard for some folks to get used to, particular senior devs. They're going to be in a slightly difficult and uncomfortable situation. but you've dealt with that before, and I can answer some questions and get into more on what some of those issues are next. So who has some questions?
Okay, everybody, you can come off mute for a minute if you have some questions.
Did we have any questions in the chat, Steve?
There are quite a few, and there's a lot of conversations. So one of the questions was how big of a group would you normally have in a mob programming team?
Well, there are a couple of different styles. So typically the general, the Scrum team or Extreme Programming team suggestion of 7 ± 2 is usually a good idea. However, there is a technique called mobbing with the audience, which we thought we might show a little bit of, where you can have a larger team and they rotate into the mob. But, we're not looking at 40 people here.
Okay.
If that's your question.
All right. So,
yes, you can do this with a dozen. It gets a little bit more tricky. Those may well be 2 different teams, but if you've got a number of, quote, specialty skills that are absolutely needed together to build a product, that may be the size you need for this one, for that particular story. Generally, I would go with smaller teams, but there can be some exceptions for some good reasons.
Yeah, I think if the team was too big, you'd start getting really bored waiting for your turn to drive.
Exactly.
Now,
okay, so there's no physical limitation to the size. However, we want to make sure that we've got a good flow and good communications going.
right. So there's some practical limitations to it.
Okay.
So you don't want it too big.
Yep.
So general Scrum team size is a general good way to go. Can be a little bit bigger. Don't get it too big.
Okay.
So Camille, if we're working in a product team, and this is as much a question as it is a statement, this is our plan. As we add people to our mob, our plan is to break them down into, using, because we're all remote now, using Zoom and breakout rooms, and break them into smaller mobs to tackle specific tasks, right, from the backlog.
Oh, there's actually multiple mobbing models, one of which is called a multi-mob or a fluid mob, or if you've got 2 mobs working in the same either virtual or physical space, and you have a limited number of people who are expert in something that both of those mobs need, then in exactly the same way you would for an open space, that expert can fluidly, naturally move from one to the other where they're needed for that afternoon or that hour or that day.
And this is actually even easier in the world of everything being remote, because they don't have to, gallop half the way across campus to get to the other team.
Yep, and thank you, Bob. That's actually the model that we had chosen to follow. Is that I didn't have the name on the tip of my tongue, but that's exactly it. The multi-mob.
The Mob Mentality Show podcast did an interview with Joshua Kierveski, where he surfaced the fact that Industrial Logic had done it and called it that. And the 2 guys that are the interviewers on Mob Mentality Show that are both from Hunter Industries said, hey, that's what we do, but we call it this. So like 3 different organizations had all discovered the same thing completely independently.
Well, I think that's why that it is described as discovering mob programming as opposed to inventing mob programming.
Well said.
Some other questions?
There's a question about anti-patterns.
About the what?
Anti-patterns in mobbing. Anti-patterns. Well, one is the runaway driver. This is when someone is in the mob, they're in the driver's seat, and instead of taking any type of direction from the navigator, they're just typing away and coding in their own fashion. Now, there are other styles of programming where that's kind of expected, but that loses the value that you're trying to impart. here, which is to grow knowledge, to share skills, to learn how to communicate. You know, maybe the driver is an expert at X, Y, or Z and is going off and doing something really complicated. But because they haven't discussed it at all, nobody else in the mob understands what's going on. So that's an anti-pattern. Some of the rest of you have been out there mobbing. You want to share what some of your anti-patterns are that you've run into?
People interrupting the mob. How do you deal with that?
So people from within the mob interrupting it, or people from
Outside.
outside the mob interrupting it?
Outside. Let's say outside first.
Outside. Well, one of the ways to do that in a physical space is that you've got you have a team where you physically grabbed a conference room. And if they're a hierarchical enough organization, they are used to not bugging people in the conference room. So one of the pros and cons of the remote world is it's easier to, you know, just butt in. One of the things that you can do, of course, you know, sneakily, is you simply don't share them the link that you're using, so they don't know where it is. That's not a good long-term strategy. But it could be a short-term strategy. You could also set up some office hours. People need to talk to you about various odd things. Say, we're available from when to whenever. You also, mobs need to take breaks. So just as if you were pair programming, having somebody interrupt you right in the middle of the pair would be very rude. And the pair can say, hey, you know, wait 20 minutes or what have you.
What about just inviting them to join the mob?
Well, that's another thought.
And if they don't join,
put their hands on the keyboard.
and they will leave.
Well, so most of the people that interrupt our mob, you know, it was working about 6 hours a day, and most of the people that interrupted it were senior managers who wanted to pull you into a meeting. Right? And we got really good at clapping back and saying, look, is this really actually a valuable meeting? Because I've got value that I'm delivering right now, right? And that can be a tough conversation with your peers or with management. But I really got to where I just cut down all my hours doing other things, and I said, you know, if you want to have a meeting with me, it's going to have to be after I'm done, right? Or if maybe I wasn't being utilized in the mob, then I would duck out. But that's kind of the best way I feel to go about it, is just protect it. Give it a priority.
And you agile coaches, you remember that one of the goals of the Scrum Master is to be the sheepdog. You're supposed to be protecting your team. I once had to, when I was in the role of coaching a Scrum Master, had to physically block the hall to keep someone from interrupting my team as a whole. Now, for those of you who have met me in person, you know I'm not small, and that was easier done than you might have otherwise in fairly narrow corridors. Also, I got him chatting on something he was really interested in, and he got distracted. But, you know, make them available at a reasonable level. But there are way too many meetings that we all get pulled onto that are complete waste of time. You know, most Zoom meetings that people, or WebEx, that somebody is giving a slideshow and there are 150 participants in it. And meanwhile, the developers are off answering email and not paying attention anyway. So like, that's a complete waste of time. Definitely try and cut down on useless meetings. If you need a financial incentive, ask the person how much all of the people they're pulling into this useless meeting are costing them an hour, and what that's going to actually give them as value in return.
Camille, I have a anti-pattern that I've learned teaching mob programming for the last 2 years. I just want to
Hey,
share.
Joel, share.
One of the things I see, and I see this across a lot of teams. I coach teams professionally. Is people see mob programming and see it as the way. Like, we're gonna mob program, and we're gonna do this to you, and your team's gonna mob program. Now, an organization can make a decision whether it's a mobbing organization or not. People can choose to elect into it. But one of the anti-patterns I see is mobbing done to teams. They don't give the team the time to emotionally adapt from being someone like Brian Finster, who's worked 37,000 years by himself, to sitting next to someone like Yusuf all day long. And they go, why is mob programming not working? And it's because you're doing it to people. You're not doing it with them. You're not doing it as a team. And you're imposing mob programming and any other skill set on them. So that's one of those anti-patterns. If you're looking at mob programming, look at it as an investment that may have no return. You may introduce mob programming to a team that rejects it, and that's okay. But give them the time to experiment with it. Give them at least 2 weeks to elect into mobbing. And if your organization thinks mobbing is the way, then you're gonna have to treat people humanely and figure out how to make it work. But don't expect people to, as Agile coaches, we're like, we love people. But the majority of developers I've worked with, including the one that clutched the mob programming slide I handed as he walked out the door, never to return again on his own volition, you gotta let people be people when they learn how to mob program.
And I think, Joel, we made this mistake, and I think that the simplest way to state it for people to understand is that it should be attraction, not promotion, right?
You know,
So jam it onto people. Go ahead, Brian.
No, I was going to say that actually I blog, and all my blog posts are rants, and one of my rants is cookie cutter scaling. It's, where we say, hey, this team is successful doing this thing, so all teams must do this thing. And that team is successful doing that thing because they're trying to meet an outcome, and they found that this way meets that outcome in their way. And you can't just impose these things on teams. You say, hey, here's some tools that work. Here's the outcomes you're trying to meet. Let's see how we can meet those outcomes. Pick the tools that work for you.
One other thing that you can do is, first of all, if you're starting to introduce it to a large enough organization, find the teams that think that the idea is exciting. You'll find a lot less resistance when the company as a whole starts saying, hey, these are the really cool guys. They're working with interesting technologies, what have you. They're doing all this neat stuff. And eventually other teams and individuals that thought, hey, I don't want to do this, change their mind. We've seen that in the Agile space. It start to grow. So look for, your early adopters who were enthusiastic. And you only have so much time as a coach anyway. Go spend it with the folks that will get most value from it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's really easy to blunt your sword against a rock.
Yeah. Yeah, I tell people, they're like, well, what if a team doesn't want your help? I'm like, we don't help them. I mean, it's easy. I'm not paid by how many teams I help. I'm paid for helping teams.
So some other questions? Oh, how much time do we have left, Steve?
Well, it's 7 o'clock.
Uh-huh.
So we've been at this for, almost 2 hours. We've been here, and it's been fabulous. Some people have asked where the video will be posted.
Oh,
I did start the video late. I admit I'm notorious for that, but I did get the video started, and it is still going now. So we're going to save that. We will post that on Agile DMV. I'm also going to post that on LinkedIn.
I have a few more, couple more slides to just quickly go through.
All right. And
so that people know what some resources are. It
Yep.
sounds like we won't have time for a second mob, unless people want to stay late.
Well, I think I'm going to turn off the video in just as soon as you're done. And then if you guys want to continue, I can leave this session, the Zoom session open.
Well, let me share the screen for the couple of slides because they're pretty quick. They're like, where do you find stuff that you're going to care about? Okay. You're seeing my screen, I assume,
Yes.
right? Okay. So we talked about different styles of navigation, and we started out with a strong leader, and that we mentioned that there were other types that where more and more people participate, which is what our mob decided that they want to do. So we won't do that. We use Zoom today. It's one of the tools. We use Cyber Dojo. Here's the information. It will be on the slides, and I will also read it. And I use the online stopwatch tool. Things that you want for remote mobbing in general. You want something that everybody can see and hear everybody's face, and that we can also see the screen. Keyboard sharing is really helpful. We had to work our ways around that being awkward in Zoom. Some type of timer and a whiteboarding. If you possibly can, let your folks have multiple screens so that they can see not only the code, but each other's faces. And of course, internet or virtual private network. Actual physical Ethernet cabling with shielded cable is better than Wi-Fi, a webcam and a microphone. So some of those are the basics on the hardware side. From the software side, you need collaborative tools. For audio and video, we saw Zoom. There's several other tools like WebEx, Microsoft Teams, etc. And likewise, screen sharing, most of those do that. Keyboard sharing is a little more awkward. You can do it in Zoom, but if you don't have the same type of keyboard, it gets difficult. Timers. And for whiteboarding, Miro is pretty cool. We were using that in XP 2020 this past week. Also, you'd like to see some chat tool. Email is not chat. Phone is not really chat. Yes, you can chat with that, but it doesn't have the facilities that other chat tools do. And of course, you need some type of repository. Some type of project board. Personally, I prefer the simple things over things like version 1 or Rally or Jira. Trello is nice and it's free. Brainstorming, retrospectives, idea board is something that I've just been looking at lately, which is pretty cool. Books. They're all available from LeanPub. And LeanPub being LeanPub, they don't cost nearly as much as if you were buying them elsewhere. They're going to come in soft copy. You can get them in PDF, or you can put them on several other types of devices as well. These are the ones that I recommend. The remote mob programming book is still in progress, but the nice thing about LeanPub is that they're putting updates to it regularly. Okay, so we had questions. Here's how to contact me again, and I like to chat with folks. So definitely contact me. If I can come help your team, great, I would love to, but even if that's not practical, then just drop me an email. That's usually the best way to get hold of me. I also tweet a little bit, and I have SlideShare where these slides will be, and of course linked in. That's it for the slides.
Hey, Camille.
All right. What did you guys think about this? Was that great? You guys can come off mute and clap hands and tell
Hey,
Camille and
Camille.
Canton coders how awesome they were, because they were.
Camille.
There we go. There we go.
Thank
You got a thumbs
you.
up from Randy. That's not easy.
Thank you. And there are a lot more details that one could go into. This is just to give you a taste. I'm happy to chat with you. And as Bob mentioned earlier, the Mob Mentality Show is really cool. Check it out. I'm going to be